Welcome to the Dipshit Files, episode 24. I'm Mr. Scriptkeeper.
And I'm Mrs. Scriptkeeper.
And today we're going to talk about Atlantis and the Richat Structure.
Yeah.
Because we're going way back.
Yeah, we are.
And I don't know who the dipshits will be. Probably us, as usual.
I think I'm a dipshit in this one, personally.
But there's some whackadoodlery.
Yeah,
sure.
there is.
What do you say we open up another dipshit file?
Hell yeah, let's do it.
Dipshit Files.
So Atlantis. I've always been fascinated by Atlantis.
Yeah, you know, me too, kind of. I never really dug into it.
So not really. You didn't give a shit.
Well, no. I thought this was a mythological... I was introduced to Atlantis by a Disney movie.
Yeah, and they made it all sci-fi.
Yeah.
And it's a good movie, though, actually.
But that was my impression of Atlantis, was this weird Disney movie. And then, of course, you know, it's been touched on by comics. I think that's where... who's the superhero?
Aquaman.
Isn't he from Atlantis?
Fuck if I know.
So there was cartoon stuff.
Makes sense, though, doesn't it?
I didn't really know a lot about it. And then, I don't know, about 10, 15 years ago, I did watch a couple of really interesting documentaries on Atlantis, but it all had this weird, like...
woo-woo kind of...
Yeah, you know, alien stuff and, I don't know, weird stuff. So I never really put a lot of weight into the story of Atlantis. I knew it was a story by Plato, but see...
Which we put a lot of weight in, Plato.
I'm still using the term story. And...
You're going to prove otherwise, perhaps.
Okay, so once I started digging into this, my whole focus... Well, we'll go into it.
If you take away the spaceships and the advanced technology and electricity and all that shit, and you listen to what Plato said, it's like, no, they were just an advanced civilization as far as they could build stuff, and they had structure, and they had, blah, blah, blah.
Well, we talk about that.
Let's fucking do it.
All right.
The Dipshit Files presents the story of Atlantis.
So today we have a fun topic, and one that has fueled decades of arguments among scientists, philosophers, and writers alike. So we're talking about Atlantis.
Yeah.
Originally, I'd started my research to cover the Richat Structure located in Mauritania, which is in the Sahara Desert. But as I dug, I entered so many other realms of thought and research that I couldn't help but expand my subject matter for this week's episode. So, today we will discuss Atlantis, the theories and scientific research, and then we'll move into the Richat Structure in the Sahara Desert, and we'll touch on the Atlantean evidence there as well.
Well, sign me the fuck up.
After all these years and our current understanding of science, is it plausible that Atlantis existed at one point in our history? Maybe. And if so, where was it located? And could it actually have been in the Sahara Desert?
That's not where water is.
Well, let's take a look.
Okay.
In order to provide the most accurate information, I had to begin by digging into Plato's description of Atlantis. So let's start there. Atlantis, a likely mythical island nation mentioned in Plato's dialogues Timaeus and Critias, has been an object of fascination among Western philosophers and historians for nearly 2,400 years. Plato, who lived around 300 BC, describes it as a powerful and advanced kingdom that sank in a night and a day into the ocean around 9600 BC. The ancient Greeks were divided as to whether Plato's story was to be taken as history or mere metaphor. Since the 19th century, there's been renewed interest in linking Plato's Atlantis to historical locations, most commonly the Greek island of Santorini, which was destroyed by a volcanic eruption around 1600 BC.
That is something I did not know.
Plato, through the character Critias in his dialogues, describes Atlantis as an island larger than Libya and Asia Minor put together, located in the Atlantic just beyond the Pillars of Heracles, generally assumed to mean the Strait of Gibraltar. Its culture was advanced, and it had a constitution similar to the one outlined in Plato's Republic. It was protected by the god Poseidon, who made his son Atlas king, and namesake of the island and the ocean that surrounded it.
Yes, Lord Poseidon, what should we name this land?
Name it after my son, Atlas.
Very good, my lord. And what should we name this giant body of water?
We shall name it Atlas after my son.
Okay, that might get confusing. What should we name this book of maps?
We will name the book of maps Atlas after my son.
Okay, then.
In the story, as the Atlanteans grew powerful, their ethics declined.
Oh, that never happened.
Their armies eventually conquered Africa as far as Egypt and Europe as far as Etruscan Italy, before being driven back by an Athenian-led alliance.
AKA alien spaceships.
Later, due to punishment from the gods, the island was plagued by earthquakes and floods and sank into the sea. So that is the foundation of the story, the Cliff's Notes version, if you will, and enough for us to have a working knowledge for the sake of this episode.
Can you say all of that again? I wasn't listening.
JK.
I'm going to try to explain in my own layman's terms all of the scientific information that we have right now on the alleged location of Atlantis, or what Plato said anyways. Basically, is what Plato said possible? Turns out it is very possible.
Oh, Plato.
And I'm going to explain why.
You know, this might be a good time for you intellectuals out there to help me ponder the idea of why Plato's closet chose their name. It's a secondhand clothing store, but this is likely what was in Plato's closet.
Hey, what you got in your closet there, Plato?
Children I'm going to have sex with for their magic powers?
Oh, fuck.
Indeed, and how?
History sucks so bad. Sorry, please continue.
Plato's story about Atlantis was written in his own style, which was a dialogue. So he's basically creating characters to talk to each other, but they're going to be sharing a story or information. This is how Plato wrote. But in this one story, and only this one, out of all the other dialogues, he talks about myths and legends a lot, and he uses them for allegory. But in this specific one, he prefaces the whole thing by saying, although this is a strange tale, it is actually true. And he even records how he heard about it, which was through his great-great-grandfather Solon.
Hey, I'm Timaeus.
I'm Cliffordius.
I'm Samanthius.
Get the fuck out my way, bitches. My parents named me Solon.
Fun fact, my mom almost named me Zebulon. That would have been sweet. Sorry, back to Solon.
Who lived around 600 BC.
That studly name.
So in the chain of events of how Plato heard the tale, he heard it through 4 people, 4 generations of grandfathers and great-grandfathers and great-great-grandfathers. And he said he was going to try and write it down to the best of his memory. He basically claims that his great-great-grandfather Solon went to Egypt in 600 BC, and he sat down with the wise old priests and sages, the history keepers and the record keepers of Egypt, and they told Solon that the Greeks had no idea how old human history really was.
Right.
And that the Greeks can only remember one deluge or one natural catastrophe. Okay, so there was a natural disaster in Crete around 1500 BC, the Minoan eruption, which the Greeks remember. Anyway, the Egyptians were like, hey, human history is actually really old. In fact, our records go back 8,000 years, and Egypt was really, really old.
Yeah, Greece is pretty old. We go back, I don't know, like a couple hundred years ago, a.k.a. the beginning of time. What do you think about that, Solon?
Yeah, that chair is 7,000 years old.
Excuse me, what?
And not only that, but before Egypt, or before any civilization that we know of was a thing, there was a previous civilization, and they were really advanced, but not in the way that science fiction likes to portray it. Plato also says nothing about there being machines or flying cars or electricity or anything like that. He just says they were advanced because they were seafaring, they had a military, a priesthood and religion, they had math, astronomy, and architecture, etc. So nothing in there is super woo-woo. All of these accomplishments have been proven humanly possible for millennia. So these priests were just saying that this stuff was just happening a long, long time ago. 9,000 years prior to 600 BC was what the Egyptians were claiming. So this ancient civilization fell due to a natural cataclysm that utterly destroyed their empire and the island where the capital city was located.
You have to wonder what it was like living in Atlantis.
Look at this amazing society we built.
Yeah, it's great.
No war, no famine, and we've mastered the elements.
Yeah, about that, I just learned about some things that we're going to call fault lines. You might want to listen to this.
What are fault lines?
They are definitely things that we should not have built our city on top of.
The Atlantean Empire was not just one island or one place. It was 10 whole kingdoms. So I personally believe that if Atlantis existed, it would have spread far and wide, kind of all over Spain, the top of Africa,
The moon.
all the islands around the Canary Islands, and any other islands that were in the Atlantic Ocean at that time. That was all Atlantis, like the civilization. But the capital city was named Atlantis.
All right, my Lord Poseidon, now that we've named a book of maps and an ocean and this landmass after your son, what should we name this capital city?
Poseidon commands that we name the capital city after my son Atlas.
You got it.
And even though it's a Greek name for it, I mean, it could have been called Zebulonville. We don't know. But Atlantis was the center city that disappeared in a day and a night and fell into the oceans.
Oh no, that city that's named after my son, that's on that continent, that's named after my son, is falling into that ocean that's named after my son.
So where exactly is Atlantis supposed to be, according to this?
The mid-Atlantic,
Okay.
out from the Straits of Gibraltar.
Right.
So if you hit some islands, and then if you continue on,
I take a left.
you would hit the capital
Okay.
of Atlantis, what we're talking about. And if you continued on from there,
I take a right.
you would hit a continent, which is America.
Good barbecue in America.
Okay, so that's the story in a nutshell. I mean, most of you know the story of Atlantis, but just in case you didn't, there we are.
I feel educated.
So today I'm looking for any scientific evidence that can show the plausibility that there was a landmass or an island in the mid-Atlantic, and is it possible that there was a landmass and then it sunk?
Because the aliens.
So we have the story of Atlantis recorded by Plato from 300 BC, and we've always sort of had it in the history books, and people really weren't that interested until about 1888, when a man named Ignatius Donnelly wrote a book called The Antediluvian World. And it became really popular with Victorians, and then it kind of fueled a following for the Atlantis myth. And people got into actually searching for it.
One day we may find Atlantis.
Yeah, but people in the future are going to call us whackadoodles because we believed in this shit.
But one day we might find it.
Yeah, but what if those neckbeards call us names in the future, man?
Wait, I have a neck beard there.
And then after the turn of the century, in between the 30s through the 70s, oceanography became more of a thing.
Right.
And people were going out into the mid-Atlantic and they were studying the area.
AKA poking marine life in the ass with sticks.
We've seen what Marlon Perkins was up to.
Launching expeditions and writing papers. And there are things in those papers that create huge question marks. And really, I'm going to say it, they point to the fact currently that the rock at the bottom of the mid-Atlantic Ocean used to be at the top.
I wonder if the other rocks make fun of him.
Remember when you used to be at the top, Stanley?
Yeah, things were great then.
Now you're stuck in the ship with the rest of us, you cunt.
Yeah, I noticed.
But I'm jumping ahead of myself. So in 1978, there was a book or an article called Atlantis, Fact or Fiction. And it claimed categorically that they had scanned the ocean floor and they couldn't see a sunken landmass of any kind or a sunken continent. So therefore, physically impossible that Plato was talking about anything real and that he had, in fact, just made it all up.
Fucking Plato.
So after that date, people then decided to look for Atlantis elsewhere because they took that at face value. However, what that article or book didn't address was all the gaping holes in questions and the evidence that people on previous scientific expeditions had found at the bottom of the ocean. They didn't answer those questions, so many think they were massively premature to just completely write it off. Scientifically, one cannot claim that there is entirely zero possibility because a lot of the geological evidence points to the opposite. But people decide to go all over the world to look for Atlantis. They decide that Atlantis is in the Antarctic, or Atlantis is in the Caribbean, or in India, or in England, or whatever.
That was a weird thing growing up. I always thought that was strange.
Yeah, it's just all
They're
over
like,
the
well,
place.
We only know about this because of Plato. Mm-hmm. And he said specifically this way in this prose. So the Bahamas is kind of weird.
Right, and it is specific. If you go and you read his dialogue, it's very specific.
Yeah.
So then that mindset hindered the plausibility of Atlantis, because then Atlantis became this crazy, fantastical myth that anybody could hypothesize about. Mm-hmm. When and where, and you could just kind of pull and stretch and fit and change Plato's text to make it fit anywhere in the world.
They made it dumb.
Right. So like, oh, maybe he said east when really he meant west. or maybe the Strait of Gibraltar is actually not that one, but it's the one in Australia.
Stupid father of philosophy.
It just becomes a bit of a fantasy. So, anybody can find Atlantis anywhere because anybody can make it up out of anywhere. So Atlantis basically becomes this big mythological joke that nobody can find. So most people stop trying to look for evidence in the original place where Plato said it was.
Okay, Plato, when you're saying west, do you mean east?
No, I mean west.
Yeah, I know you're saying west, but do you mean east?
What the frick are you talking about? Plato, when you're talking about the pillars of the whatever.
Heracles?
Could it be this other thing that I think?
Well, is it the pillars that I'm talking about?
No, it's totally different.
Well, I mean, no then.
Are you attacking me?
What?
I took much of the information to follow from Randall Carlson's extensive research, and you can actually look into this guy. The easiest way to check out what he has to say is on YouTube. He has an entire series discussing this topic.
Well, if he has YouTube videos.
I know, right? He's got books and articles and stuff, but the easiest way to digest it is through video.
Does he have
really.
letters after his name from a reputable institution? That is the question.
Anyway, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, are you buckled in? Because I'm about to throw some science at you.
I don't have any seatbelts on my chair. It's an office chair.
Well, I'm going to try and share it in the most digestible way possible.
But
I'm
yeah.
going to try and make it easy.
I'll get my Tums ready.
I'm going to need help too. So there's lots of words in here that are hard to pronounce.
What's Greek stuff?
Well, not all of it. Some of it's geological.
Oh shit.
So, you know,
Science-y and Greeky. Here we go.
Don't turn this one into a drinking game. It's midday and y'all will get sick. So there was a paper that was published talking about the Glacioceustace. Right? Okay, so
that thing, of course.
Glacioceustace.
I have a T-shirt with that on it. That's how I know that word.
In English, that means changes in the sea from the melting of ice glaciers. Okay, so it's a beautiful word that just means melting ice.
Yeah, fuck yeah.
May I ask, Garçon?
Yes, sir.
I do find the temperature in here to be rather overwhelmingly hot.
Oh, I'm sorry, sir.
That's all right. My drink is having a glacial Eustace inside of it.
What?
Glacial Eustace.
Did you want some more ice?
Clifford, stop. You're embarrassing the whole family.
Glacial Eustace.
12,000 years ago, the world was in an ice age, and there was a huge amount of ice. Ice sheets covering pretty much all of North America, the north of like Scandinavia, and all of the north of the equator-ish, like north of the wall.
Ashwell.
So around 9600 BC, something happened. Most probably a comet. The Younger Dryas Comet Event Hypothesis states a comet struck several places in this ice sheet in North America and instantly melted the ice sheet, and millions of metric tons of fresh water plunged into the Atlantic Ocean. What this study was talking about was what happens to the sea level and also the seabed when an event like this happens.
Terrible things.
Evidently, even a small amount of water entering into the sea from a melted glacier affects the sea and the seabed.
So comet's bad.
So millions of metric tons of water flowing in is going to make the seabed essentially seesaw. So one plate will dip and another plate rises as the water flows. This kind of change is going to cause tectonic movement because, as you know, the Earth is actually like a lot of hard crust with a gooey center, kind of like a Cadbury cream egg. The plates are, Cadbury. The plates are movable, they're flexible, and according to these studies, they don't just move horizontally. There is hard evidence that shows the plates also move vertically up and down.
Those fault lines are getting busy making little fault lines.
There's a whole kind of flexion thing going on.
That's what I was saying. They were flexion in the...
So if you look at maps of the Atlantic Ocean, you'll see the Atlantic Ocean Ridge, which is a trifecta.
Can I bet on it?
3 plates that meet in the middle of the Atlantic
A
Ocean,
little tectonic orgy.
causing a crazy weak spot for the crust of the Earth.
From all the plate tectonic nookie.
It's the place in the ocean where 3 plates meet, and therefore there's serious weakness, and there's a lot of activity going on there.
Yes, there is.
You can also see this
On faultlinehardcore.com.
with these horizontal lines
sorry.
that you can see on maps and scans of the ocean floor.
Fascinating.
It actually looks like a bunch of stretch marks going out across the seabed. These lines are being studied, and as of now, it is stated that these sort of stretch marks and horizontal lines must be caused not just by horizontal moving of the plates, but also vertical bends. It's like stretching the Earth's crust, and it's causing these long stretch marks that are coming right out across the ocean floor. So not only is this the very precise location where Plato is saying that there was a landmass that a civilization lived on in the Ice Age, it's on the most geographically weakest point of the entire ocean floor.
Great place to build a city, Atlantans.
Right. We built this city. If there was anywhere that was going to mean trouble if a global cataclysm took place, it's probably going to be at the very center of the place where the three massive plates meet.
Are you sure we should build the city here, Poseidon?
Yes, and we will name it after my son.
I mean, you're already on a bit of dangerous ground. We all know don't live on a fault line. It's dangerous because that shit moves.
Way to go, Atlanteans, you dumb fucking idiots.
All right, moving on. So in a study in 1948, they went down and they literally dredged up and tested bits of rock from the Azores Plateau, which is now about 3,000 feet below sea level. They found what's called granite detritus rock. So detritus rock is particles of rock derived from pre-existing rock through processes of weathering and erosion, which essentially is continental rock, which is land. It's land mass. It's rock that has to have been formed in the air. So there is a huge argument right now among scientists that when the continent split all of those many, many millennia ago, and a chunk went this way and became Europe, and a chunk went that way and became America, that there was actually a chunk of it stuck right in the middle of the ocean. Not only that, but that chunk, which was once above water, has essentially done this at different points in time.
Nothing new under the sun.
They also found in a separate study that high magnesium calcite, which you can actually test in a lab, and it can tell you whether or not the rock was formed underwater or above. And guess what? It was formed above water.
Fucking.
At some point in time, the rock that is at the bottom of the Azores right now was not at the bottom.
Some assholes built maybe a city on it.
Right, it was built in, or was formed in the air. In 1948, there was an expedition published in National Geographic by a guy named Maurice Ewing. He was exploring the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, and I think this is actually the guy that was collecting all the rocks and stuff we just talked about. He was proving that there was continental rock at the bottom of the ocean. In 1949, he did a follow-up article sharing that 3,000 feet below the surface, they found what they called prehistoric sand.
They used to put that in boxes for the dinosaurs to poop in. Sorry.
The theory here is that sand is made through the process of being on a shoreline in shallow water because of the movement of the waves that do not happen at the lower depths. So essentially, there was a beach at some point in the mid-Atlantic, and now it's at the bottom.
And some assholes had a city on that beach. And
I said waterfront. Waterfront.
In 1947 to 1948, there was a Swedish deep sea exploration by Hans Petersen, and they published a book in 1954 called The Ocean Floor. And in there, they also share a theory that would account for a sunken landmass in the time frame that we're talking about. They tested some of the rocks and found they were what's essentially a shallow water limestone that was found at the bottom, as well as this continental granite type rock. So this shallow water limestone, which again cannot be made at the depths we're talking about, they tested it and they dated it to around 12,000 BC. So not only have they discovered that there is prehistoric sand, but there is shallow water limestone, which can only be formed in times of immersion.
During fault line sex.
So immersion, which is going underwater when things get immersed, and then you've got immersion, which is when things go out of water. So the testings on the rocks at the bottom show that they are continentally formed chunks of rock, that there is shallow water limestone formed in times of immersion, and also prehistoric sand, as in there was once a beach, which is now at the bottom.
And that's where SpongeBob lives.
We also know that the tectonic plates right in the center on the ridge move vertically up and down. And when they calculated the time frames for the movement of up and down...
Right, and the data is collected in the standard system of bound chicka bound bounce. I'm sorry.
At some point, the rock that they're testing that was immersed was sometime in the late Cenozoic age. So the Cenozoic age, that's anything from the last couple 100,000 years up to the last 10,000 years. So it's perfectly scientifically plausible, based on all these different studies, that the Azores Plateau, which is currently 3,000 feet below water, was at one point above water, possibly
recently,
in the last 10,000 years.
Fucking that dip.
Yep. So let's...
And then some assholes built their goddamn houses on it.
So let's also consider this. let's just assume that Plato made this entire story up. So if he just decided to make up the story that his great-great-great-grandfather passed down to him, and he just made up an island and a location of the island, it's scientifically plausible still.
Right.
In fact, it's dead on. Realistically, the trifecta fold of all the tectonic plates is going to be the place that you would bet your money on if there were a disaster hit. It's going to be bad. It's crazy that he pointed this exact spot out in his made-up story.
Dick.
Also, the date that he claims was shared way back when, scientists are now telling us that there was a massive global cataclysm around that time, 9600 BC. Exactly on the money. Well done, Plato. Well done. So not only did he get the location spot on, he got the date correct. So at this point in my studying, I'm just wondering about the mathematical odds here. We've all likely heard of the probability theory and understand that if enough guesses are made on a specific topic over time, one of them will end up being correct. But I'm just wondering, what are the odds here of somebody just inventing a story about an island that disappeared into the ocean and just randomly picking a date and a location? What are the chances that they would pick the very location that would be shown 2,500 years later to lie on a tectonic plate weak spot and the date that science is announcing the world basically collapsed? I mean, I'm not saying I'm bought and sold on this
You
story,
kinda are.
but I am intrigued.
I am too.
I'm intrigued.
It
really.
is very
it's very,
intriguing.
it's enticing.
When you take the sci-fi
It's
shit out of
seductive.
it, it is very much like,
Yeah.
well, of course, well, we'll talk about this at the end.
Yeah.
There's lots to talk about there.
I'm excited.
Me too.
Okay, so additionally, in 1988, there was a study that was published in the Science Journal, and it was all about the positioning of the Gulf Stream during the Quaternary glaciations, or basically the Ice Age. So get this.
It's already been gotten.
During the Ice Age, the Gulf Stream and all the movement of the Atlantic waters was different than it is today.
That makes sense.
Presently, water gets heated up at the equator and it goes past the Americas. It heads into the Mexican Gulf where it's warmed up there, and then it shoots across the Atlantic and it goes quite far up. And it hits Iceland and England and it warms the north of France. And it keeps that area nice and warm. But back in the Ice Age, it was a different thing. It didn't go into that part of North and South America, and it didn't go as far up because, well, it was an ice age and it was all ice. But what it did do was it circled from the equator up around the Atlantic in almost a perfect circle, and it would encircle the Azores Plateau. So if a civilization was choosing a place to live to thrive back in the Ice Age, you weren't going to pick a place for your capital city that's going to be like in the ice. What I'm
Instead, you're going to pick the fucking middle of the ocean where it's a bunch of tectonic plates.
Right. Well, you don't know there's tectonic plates
I know,
there.
but they did, and they're dumb.
Well, I know. They are dumb. Dumb. What I'm theorizing here is that the location of the Azores Plateau is beautiful as far as climate goes during the Ice Age because it's being warmed up by the Gulf Stream. So if you were hypothesizing about where you were going to live or where a civilization may put their roots down, this would have been beautiful. It would have been a little island, nice and warm, surrounded by warmed up Atlantic Ocean. So in the words of Randall Carlson, where I got most of the geological research for this episode, his quote is, "It is possible in the geophysical understanding of the way that the world works as we know it today. It's definitely possible. Some would argue even plausible that Plato was correct." End quote.
Well, I say fuck that guy.
So now you can consider yourself armed with information if you ever find yourself on the Plato side of the Atlantis debate. I don't know if you would. I don't know how many people
all the time. It's a very common bar kind of conversation.
So if anybody emphatically states, oh, Plato just made it up for an allegory, there's no way there can be a sunken landmass in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, you can actually say, actually, that's not true, because I can quote you several scientific papers and expeditions that actually attest to the opposite. And did you know that the location where Plato pointed Atlantis to be where the tectonic plates fold is located? And did you know that they moved up and down and not just side to side?
Boom. Continental whoopee.
And at one point, the bottom of the ocean was at the top in the time frame that Plato said it was?
Boom.
Mic drop.
Boom.
Somebody get the fuck down there and look.
But seriously, at the end of the day, they haven't found Atlantis, and none of these scientists are claiming they found Atlantis. What they are saying is that there are some questions that need to be looked into. And the fact that the Science Journal of 1978 did not answer or even acknowledge the questions from all these previous expeditions, yet completely ruled it out, is confusing and a bit irresponsible in my opinion.
Probably Illuminati confirmed it.
So now we're going to move on to the second part of this episode, the Eye of the Sahara, or the Richat Structure.
What the fuck is this crazy thing out in the desert, eh?
For millennia, the Eye of the Sahara was hiding in plain sight. That's because this huge and mysterious geologic formation is hard to spot from ground level walking around on Earth. Turns out that we really discovered this incredible bullseye in the sand only when we began sending humans to space. But even now that we found it, scientists don't fully understand it. The Eye of the Sahara, more formally known as the Richat Structure, is in the western Sahara Desert in Mauritania. On the ground, it's about 25 miles across. When the Gemini 4 mission was being prepared in 1965, the astronauts were asked to take photos of Earth's terrain. They were asked to look out for any large circular features which might be the roots of impact structures. Impact craters are geologically important because they tell us about the history of Earth. Also, knowing...
Lets us know we might get fucked again.
It's helpful.
Also, knowing how many times space rocks have crashed into our planet can help scientists make predictions about the future.
Mr. President, this scientist has made a prediction.
Right, let him in. What's up, Mr. Scientificals?
Oh, Mr. President, there's a meteor coming.
Oh, it's coming here?
Yes, it's going to hit Earth.
Like soon, before the election?
No, it'll be after the election.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah, but Mr. President...
Right, do you have any solutions to this?
No, I'm a scientist studying space.
Whatever, then get out of here and bring me a nuclear guy.
And for a while, scientists did think that the Eye of the Sahara was an impact crater. But they didn't find enough melted rock for that idea to hold any water. Current theories suggest a much more complicated story behind the incredible formation. The main ring structure of the eye is thought to be the eroded remains of what was once a dome of layers of Earth crust. Scientists still have questions about the Eye of the Sahara, but two Canadian geologists have a working theory about its origins. They think that the eye's formation began more than 100 million years ago, as the supercontinent Pangaea was pulled apart by plate tectonics, and what are now Africa and South America were being torn away from each other.
Oh, sad.
Molten rock pushed up towards the surface, but didn't make it all the way, creating a dome of rock layers, kind of like a really large zit. They also created fault lines, circling and crossing the eye. The molten rock also dissolved limestone near the center of the eye, which collapsed to form a special type of rock called breccia. A little after 100 million years ago, the eye erupted violently. That collapsed the bubble partway, and erosion did the rest of the work to create the Eye of the Sahara as we know today.
Are you saying it wasn't aliens?
The rings are made of different types of rock that erode at different speeds. The paler circle near the center of the eye is volcanic rock created during that explosion. Modern astronauts are fond of the eye because so much of the Sahara Desert is an unbroken sea of sand. The eye is one of the few breaks in the monotony, and now it's become a key landmark for them. Some people believe that the Eye of the Sahara is actually the remains of the city of Atlantis.
Boom.
Yes, which Plato describes as concentric rings of water in land. There have been several contenders for the possible location of Atlantis, but all fail in some way to fulfill the criteria Plato had laid out in its description. The Richat Structure is at face value surprisingly fitting. So here are just a few of the correlations between Atlantis as described by Plato and the Richat Structure. And the part of Plato will be played by the script keeper. So number 1 is King Atlas.
Quote, "And to all of them he gave names, giving to him that was eldest and king the name after which the whole island was called, and the sea spoken of as the Atlantic, because the first king who was then reigned had the name of Atlas." End quote.
Name everything Atlas. We got that.
Plato describes how Atlas, who was Poseidon's firstborn of 10 brothers, was appointed king to rule over all 10 provinces of Atlantis. Coincidentally, Atlas was also the name of the first king of Mauritania, West Africa, the location of the Richat Structure, overlooking the Atlantic Ocean and having the Atlas Mountains to the north. A map by Herodotus from 430 BC names that specific area Atlantis.
Well.
So number 2, the accurate shape and size.
Quote, "Alternate zones of sea and land, larger and smaller, encircling one another, There were 2 of land and 3 of water. The part about the city was all a smooth plain, enclosing it round about, and being itself encircled by mountains. The plain faced towards the south and was sheltered from the northern blasts by the mountains." End quote.
Plato goes on to explain the area in great detail, including all of the measurements. Also visible from space, the massive Richat structure has 2 concentric bands of resistant quartzite rocks which form the ridges, with lower-level sedimentary rock between them. The layout and measurements of the concentric circles in the gateway to Atlantia include massive flat plains to the south and an entire mountain ridge to the north. They fit Plato's lengthy description.
I bet Atlanta has a better airport than Atlantia did. Just saying.
All right, number 3, the Eye of Africa was an island.
Quote, "The island of Atlantis, which was an island larger than Libya and Asia once upon a time. The whole region rose sheer out of the sea to a great height." End quote.
A sea level rise by almost 1,400 feet would show how the rings appear with the lake filled within a large island. Although the finding of marine fossils and bones in the area indicate that the area was certainly below sea level at various points in time, Plato describes how fresh waters ran from the mountains into a freshwater lake at the city of Atlantis and then ran towards the sea to the south, a channel that's also present. Plato's remark that the island was larger than Libya and Asia Minor might actually refer to the northwest Africa's apparent separation from the mainland by the ancient Tamanrasset River, I hope I pronounced that right, that ran from the Atlas Mountains through what is now the Sahara Desert to the sea at Mauritania up to 7,000 years ago. With the sea level much lower, the lake would have been fed entirely by fresh water. Number 4, fresh water is present to this day.
Quote, "2 springs of water from beneath the earth, one of warm water and the other of cold, and making every variety of food to spring up abundantly from the soil." End quote.
The presence of a freshwater spring has been located in the center of the Richat structure, whereas the presence of a hot spring in the past was likely due to the volcanic activity beneath it. Furthermore, the area still tends to hold fresh rainwater from streams running into it, growing vegetation in the middle of the desert to this day. The deeply weathered bedrock that forms the ridges was created under tropical environments, indicating the place was once lush, and many well-preserved freshwater fossils were found in the finer sandy deposits between them. Number 5, it's a land of elephants.
"It contained a very large stock of elephants, for there was an ample food supply, not only for all the other animals which haunt the marshes and lakes and rivers, or the mountains and plains, but likewise also for this animal, which of its nature is the largest and most voracious with the biggest cock." End quote. It's very voracious. Virile even.
The presence of elephants is a very important detail that certainly makes Africa a far more likely candidate for Atlantis than any of its European counterparts. The African elephant is known to have become extinct in Mauritania. Number 6, the local stones are a match.
"And the stone they quarried beneath the central island all round, and from beneath the outer and inner circles, some of it being white, some black, and some red. Some of their buildings were simple, but in others they put together different stones, varying the color to please the eye, and to be a natural source of delight. It, the city, was fashioned by nature and by the laborers of many generations of kings through long ages." End quote.
White, black, and red stone is evident at the site and in the buildings of the nearby town of Udain. The stones are small, not megaliths of any sort, and the buildings rudimentary, so it would not be surprising that a massive flood would wash it all away and leave no trace. Interestingly, the absolutely flat, leveled tops of the rings are strewn with rubble.
Interesting.
Number 7, ancient artifacts were found at the site.
Quote, "And round about it, on this side and on that, were the barracks for the greater part of the spearmen. But the guardhouse of the more trusty of them was posted in the smaller circle, which was nearer the Acropolis, while those who were the most trustworthy of all had dwellings granted them with the Acropolis round about the persons of the kings."
End quote.
End quote.
Exceptional accumulations of artifacts or stone spears and tools of undetermined age and origin were found at the Richat structure. The fact that these were generally absent at its innermost depressions has been taken to indicate that the area was only used for short-term stone tool manufacturing and hunting. But this finding would also fit with the description that the outer circle was largely inhabited by working citizens and soldiers, with Atlantean royalty in the middle.
Look at those royal cunts get the fucking middle.
Yeah, who voted for them?
They shouldn't get the fucking middle.
Yeah, what makes them so special?
I want the fucking middle.
Number 8, sub-Saharan DNA from a previously known ancient population.
No Plato quote.
Recently, DNA testing of the Tephoralt skeletons identified clear markers linking their 15,000-year-old DNA to sub-Saharan Africa. The Tephoralt skeletons are Ibero-Mauritian human skeletons from the Upper Paleolithic that were found in a cave cemetery in northern Oujda, Morocco.
Holy wow, that's a sentence right there.
The DNA has some characteristics matching modern Hadza hunter-gatherers from East Africa and others matching modern West Africans, but the precise combination of characteristics of the Tephoralt individuals matches no previously identified population. This suggests that their DNA heritage may come from a population that no longer exists.
Aliens.
Number 9, the dating fits.
Quote, 9,000 is the sum of years since the war occurred, as is recorded between the Atlantean dwellers beyond the pillars of Heracles, the Strait of Gibraltar, and all that dwelt within them, end quote.
The Ibero-Mauritians, or people of Atlantis, may have fought the people of Egypt around 9,000 BC.
Fucking cool.
Plato dates the war to 9,000 years before Solon. That's around 11,000 years ago. Numerous concordant radiocarbon dating indicates that the bulk of the sediments that accumulated at the Richat Structure between 15,000 and 8,000 BC. Interestingly, the meteor impact in Greenland that might well have spurred the earthquakes and floods may be as young as 12,000 years. All this dating aligns with Plato's story.
Fucking guy.
Number 10, the evidence of a flood.
Quote, but afterwards there occurred violent earthquakes and flood, and in a single day and night of misfortune all of the warlike men in a body sank into the earth, and the island of Atlantis in a like manner disappeared into the depths of the sea, end quote.
The topography surrounding the Richat Structure supports the notion that Africa had suffered a gigantic flood. In satellite images, it looks as if something literally swept over the entire area towards the sea. The gravelly deposits include slope scree, debris flow, and fluviatile or river deposits, supporting Plato's description that the area was flooded, quote, within a single day and night, end quote.
Well, what do you think, Terry? We should probably take some precautions. This is a pretty spooky storm.
No, it'll be fine.
I don't know, Terry.
I'm gonna take a nap. Just wake me up when it's over.
Okay.
Several hours later.
Terry, wake up. Wake the fuck up, Terry.
What is it? What is it?
Our whole fucking city's been goddamn...
What's the problem?
We're drowning in it.
It's gonna be fine.
Number 11, the Eye of Osiris. One look at the Richat Structure and it brings to memory the symbol of the Eye of Osiris. Also known as the Eye of Horus, it's an ancient Egyptian symbol of protection, power, and prosperity. Some even associate it with the shape of the pineal gland.
Mainly hippies and stoners.
That represents the third eye or awareness of the unseen.
Hippies.
The symbol may have originated in Atlantis because, according to Plato,
Quote, so all these themselves and their descendants dwelt for many generations, bearing rule over many other islands throughout the sea, and holding sway besides, as was previously stated, over the Mediterranean peoples as far as Egypt and in Italy. Motherfuckers. End quote.
the main argument against the Richat Structure as a possible location for Atlantis is that it currently stands at 1,388 feet above sea level.
Okay.
But perhaps there may be some explanations for this that we simply have not yet discovered.
Aliens.
Whether or not the Richat Structure may really be Atlantis is subject to opinion, since no excavations have been made to the site. So what do you think? Do you think this site ought to be excavated?
Fuck no.
What about Atlantis?
Suck it, Atlantis.
If you were one of the individuals like myself that went into this episode thinking Atlantis was a myth,
Yes.
what are your thoughts now?
I don't know. Let's find out on the other side of this little sound thing.
What do our two dipshits think about whatever the fuck this shit was, huh?
All right, so in all the research for this crazy subject, like what... I mean, there's tons of mind-blowing things here that are pretty interesting. What blew your mind the most?
You know, the whole thing, as I dug through this research, there's a lot of stuff that I didn't put in for brevity. I mean, there's a lot of cool, detailed
What
information.
did you leave out that was something that was fascinating to you?
The measurements I left the measurements out. The fact that there's a whole rectangular area above the Richat structure that would explain more of a civilization. And it's actually, a lot of people think it's man-made, and some people are arguing that it's just naturally occurring because of the type of stone that's in that area. But it looks like half a square, half a rectangle. It's two walls that converge at a 90-degree angle, and it's massive. So I left that out, and that would explain outside of the city part of the civilization. There's other things that they found within the Richat structure. There's some pottery. I left that out. So there was just a lot of little tiny details. It was like, wow, that's really interesting, but it's not as hard of evidence. So I tried to put all of the real solid stuff in. The other thing that I found fascinating was if you follow Plato's directions, and he is very, very clear. There's very little vagueness to where he's saying Atlantis is located when you read his dialogue.
Yeah, from what we learned today, it's very specific. It's very specific.
Yeah. So if you follow his directions, it takes you right out into exactly where this tectonic, the trifecta is.
Right. Not the Richat structure.
Not the Richat structure. But that can be also explained during the process of the rising of the sea levels and that sort of thing. Because if you go, let's see, I'm trying to remember the map. If you go from the
Pillars of Gibraltar.
Yes, yeah. If you go from there, but you would have to go straight south. You wouldn't go east.
Like he says.
Or west. Yeah.
West, yeah.
Right. So
maybe he meant the other way. Maybe you meant the other way.
I know. And now we're doing what I bitched about in the whole thing, where it's like, well, you can't change his directions.
Right.
If you follow his directions.
If he's right, you might as well follow it.
If you follow his directions, it takes you right out in the middle of the Atlantic.
If you decide not to follow his directions, you're just kind of making it up.
Which, there
Go
is.
for it, though.
Right. Well, there's no.
But he might be making. This could be his Star Wars, too. This could be like their story. And it could be funny, like in the context of the time, where it's like, everything I'm saying is true. And if they knew,
maybe there's an inside joke there.
Exactly. Like the people at the time, they're like, he's never said that. Oh, and it was a joke.
Maybe.
Could be.
Maybe.
Things get lost like that.
I know, but
people are going to listen to my comedy and they're going to be like, whoa.
Even if it's a joke,
douche.
let's say it was just made up as a big fucking joke. How is it so spot on?
Right.
That's just
pretty amazing.
it. He even got the time frame right.
But
and this is stuff that we've recently discovered.
But the fact that it was thousands of years before his great-great-grandfather, you know, I mean, it's interesting. Like, how did they keep track of that stuff? What sort of technology is lost? Did they write shit down because we didn't have that?
It was the Egyptians.
Right.
The Egyptians are the ones that provided this information. They're record keepers, because Solon learned the story from the Egyptians.
See, that makes me think it's like you wonder if those pyramids, because they're all over the world, and I mean, it's a really good way to stack rocks up. That is the main thing. It's like those will last
if you don't want it to fall.
Yeah, that's a real smart way to do it. But it is interesting that the greatest one so far that we know of is the pyramid in Giza, and it's the oldest one.
I know.
And that to me says, like, call me a whackadoodle if you want, but that says there must have been some practice before they were like, we made the most perfect one. Maybe not, because sometimes, it's like, I'm going to try and make the violin, and then they make the very best violin ever the first time they do it.
And they can never recreate it.
I don't know if that happened or not.
It's kind of like when I made brownies the first time. They were fucking perfect. And then they were burnt.
Garbage from now on.
Exactly.
Awful.
You never know.
The chickens won't even eat it. But I wonder, because it looks like it's fascinating to me to even think about societies that may have had a higher level of technology for the time. That's when you take away the sci-fi stuff. This is, Plato's talking about dudes with spears and that they were seafaring and all that stuff.
He never talked about sci-fi.
No flying ships.
We, as dipshits, douchebags, added that shit in.
It makes...
Disney. I blame fucking Disney.
It's a great movie, both of them. But it is... they're underrated. It was a good time for Disney animation at that period.
Yeah, but they're not telling the story.
They're definitely not. They're telling another story.
Yeah.
But it's still a good story.
Based on a true story, though.
It was. No. Who knows? But I like the idea of civilizations having science for, we've only had it for a few hundred years. In the way the Western world practices science, it's only been at our fingertips for 400 years or so.
Right.
And look what we've done. And really, when we pushed the scientific method hard, Industrial Revolution to space travel was like,
Right.
so you wonder if in history throughout time, if there was somebody, if they were just messing around with science and metallurgy, they would advance pretty far.
Right.
And then, but the world just eats things. And so to me,
it
it's
does.
fascinating to think that there could have been human civilizations, maybe not electricity and stuff, but maybe they had machinery. Maybe they figured out combustion engines and stuff, steam engines.
Well, the thing that gets me is we as humans also destroy things. We build and we destroy. We're seeing this just in the past handful of years with the destruction of, if you go back to the Iraqi, the museums and stuff. They're destroying historical items that we as people alive today know they existed because we saw them and there were pictures of them. Give us 2,000 or 3,000 years with those items gone and potentially the records destroyed, because records are a lot easier to destroy than the actual items themselves. That stuff would be lost to history. So what's to say that hadn't happened before?
It seems likely.
Yeah.
I mean, history, even a strong history. New York City one day could become a whisper in history.
Right.
Because the earth eats everything.
Yeah.
There won't be buildings left when humans stop working on maintaining it all.
Yeah, well, look at the sunken city in what is China or Japan, the pyramid.
I think it is Japan.
It's Japan, yeah. Look at that. That obviously was above water at one point. It had to be.
There are hundreds of cities, at least over 100, in the Mediterranean Sea alone that are underwater just from time. And it's amazing. It's amazing that we forget that. And of course, basically Atlantis would be a big, nice city. It'd be like another Cairo. It'd be something. It'd be Baghdad, but on an island somewhere that they decided to build it on a fucking series of fault lines, like a bunch of smarties.
Right, and it got lost. And,
looking at you, San Francisco.
And it doesn't mean just because, let's just say, for shits and giggles, Atlantis was there and it did sink. It was 9,000 years, 11,000 years ago. So how much sediment can land on the bottom of the ocean in 11,000 years? They found rocks down there, and they found sand, and it's this really cool scientific exploration that they've discovered down there on the rock itself. But what's to say that the buildings and all of the archaeological finds that they would discover 3,000 feet below sea level or below the surface of the water isn't buried,
right,
or destroyed or just eaten up by the ocean?
It depends on where you are in the ocean, I think, because because it's more whatever, more plant life, more coral reef life, whatever bacteria lives there, close to the vents of the volcanic shit of the ocean. Yeah, I don't know shit about the ocean.
Well, we may never find evidence of Atlantis if it even existed in that area. Right. We may never find evidence of it because it was so long ago.
Just like they won't find New York if things just happen and there's only a little band of humans that survive in Australia or some shit. Crocky. They won't find New York. They certainly won't find the Georgia Guidestones like they had planned on since somebody blew them up. I don't know why I brought that up, but it just made me think of it. All right, well, this was crazy. It's fun. I love the Atlantis story. It gets your imagination rolling if you're interested in fiction and stuff. And so many people have, delved into the missing. Well, it's just that whisper. Yeah, it's just a fun thing to delve into. Atlantis Jesus is coming next week for SKATCAST. It's good timing that we did this, and we didn't plan it like this.
No.
All right. Well, thank you to Bodhi, our quartermaster.
Yes,
doing research behind the scenes. He's already accomplished a couple. Yeah. So
those are coming. I can't wait. Specifically, as we get close to Halloween, he's got one that I'm really excited about.
Yes, we are very excited for Halloween in the whole SKATCAST universe. We got tons of fun stuff planned for you because it's our holiday.
Yeah.
That's what we think anyway.
Yeah.
But thank you to Quartermaster Bodhi, a member of our trusted triad of turds.
The T3.
The T3. Trusted turd triad? I don't know. But it also includes Don, our shitbox wizard. You'll find him. He's our SKATCAST aficionado on Facebook.
Yes.
That's SH Kitty Butthole T box. And then, of course, we've got Chris, the Discord Dookie Slayer.
Yes.
We love that gentleman. He's in there keeping you people in order with all the fun things you can do in Discord. Holy shit. Why would you go anywhere else if you can have a Discord, saith the internet? But we have a lot of fun in the SKATCAST Discord, or at least a lot of you do, it sounds like. And we appreciate that. info@skatcast.com. Let us know if we said something wrong, or if you'd like to have something new added to the show, or
exactly,
if you'd like to give us praise.
You just want to, tell me that, bitch, you got it wrong.
Bitch. Why you even try?
Why you do this?
SKATCAST.com. You can find other episodes of this. You can find our merch. There's lots of Dipshit Files merch on the store. You can get mugs and shirts, and there's all sorts of crap.
Yeah.
We've made a lot of things in this last few months.
It's been fun.
It's been a lot of fun. And as always, we'll talk at you in the future.
And it'll seem like the present.
Bye.
Bye.
Dipshit Files.
Bing bong. Ew.